The day Luella Kate Marsh was declared too clever for her own good was the same day she discovered that intelligence could be a woman's greatest sin. The words still rang in her ears 3 months later as she stood on the depot platform in Willow Creek, Texas, clutching a worn leather satchel that contained everything she owned. The September sun beat down mercilessly, and dust devils danced across the empty street like ghosts of broken promises. Miss Marsh, a gravelly voice cut through the desert silence. She turned to find a weathered man in his 60s, his silver mustache drooping beneath kind eyes. "I'm Horace Delaney. Sent word about the schoolmarm position." Luella straightened her spine, the same defiant gesture that had gotten her expelled from 3 different households back east. "Mr. Delaney, I should inform you that my previous employers found my methods unconventional." Horace chuckled, a sound like pebbles tumbling down a hillside. "Ma'am, in Willow Creek, conventional got buried with the last preacher. We need someone who can teach these youngsters to think, not just recite." The schoolhouse sat at the edge of town like a prayer made of weathered pine and hope. Inside, dust motes danced in shafts of amber light, and the air smelled of chalk and possibility. Luella ran her fingers along the rough-hewn desks, each one carved with the dreams and frustrations of frontier children. 23 students, Horace said, watching her explore. Ages 6 to 16. Some of them have been without proper schooling for 2 years. And discipline. That's where it gets interesting. Horace's eyes twinkled. "We've got ourselves a few spirited young men. August Rose boy, Zebulon, chief among them. Smart as a whip, but wild as a March hare." Luella had encountered spirited boys before. Back in Boston, she'd been dismissed for encouraging young Timothy Whitmore to question his father's business practices. The boy had been asking uncomfortable questions about worker conditions, questions that led to his father's hasty donation to find Luella suitable employment elsewhere. "I don't believe in breaking spirits, Mr. Delaney. Only in channeling them toward worthwhile pursuits." "That's what I was hoping you'd say." The next morning, Luella arrived at the schoolhouse to find her first challenge waiting. A tall, lean figure sat backwards on a horse directly in front of the school steps, his hat tilted low over his eyes. Even from a distance, she could see the lazy confidence in his posture, the way he seemed to own the very air around him. "You can come down from there, young man," she called out, her voice carrying the authority she'd learned to project. "School starts in 10 minutes. The figure straightened, and when he lifted his head, Luella felt something shift inside her chest. He wasn't a boy at all, but a man, perhaps 25, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of storm clouds. A deputy's badge caught the morning light on his vest. "Ma'am." He touched his hat brim, a gesture both respectful and somehow mocking. "Emmett Crowley. I'm not here for lessons." "Then what brings you to my schoolhouse, Mr. Crowley?" He swung down from his horse with fluid grace, and she noticed the way his hands moved. Careful, deliberate, like a man who'd learned that quick movements could mean the difference between life and death. "Wanted to get a look at the new schoolmarm. Heard tell she's got some unusual ideas about education." "And what concern is that of yours?" "Everything in this town is my concern, Miss Marsh." He stepped closer, and she caught the scent of leather and sage, "including making sure our children don't get filled with notions that might cause trouble." The words hit her like a physical blow. How many times had she heard variations of this same warning? Don't teach them to question. Don't encourage them to think beyond their station. Don't give them ideas above their raising. "I see." Her voice went dangerously quiet. "And what sort of notions concern you, deputy?" "The kind that make a person think they're better than the life they were born to. The kind that lead to disappointment and heartache." Behind him, children began to gather, curious faces peering around the schoolhouse corner, drawn by the tension crackling between the 2 adults. Luella could see Zebulon among them, a boy of perhaps 14 with intelligent eyes and defiant shoulders. "Mr. Crowley," she said, her voice carrying across the dusty yard, "I believe knowledge is never dangerous. Only ignorance is." Pretty words, schoolmarm. But I've seen what happens when folks get ideas above their station. Usually ends in tears. He mounted his horse again, that same fluid motion that spoke of years in the saddle. "You just remember this. Town's got a way of doing things. Might be wise to respect that." As he rode away, Luella felt the familiar fire kindle in her chest. The same fire that had burned when Professor Whitmore told her she was too clever for her own good. The same fire that had sustained her through 3 dismissals and a cross-country journey to this godforsaken patch of desert. She turned to face her students, 23 pairs of eyes watching her with mixture of curiosity and wariness. Zebulon stepped forward, his chin raised in challenge. Miss Marsh, what Deputy Crowley said about getting ideas above our station. Yes? What if we like our ideas just fine where they are? Luella smiled, the first real smile she'd worn in months. Then we're going to get along just fine, Mr. Rowe. But as she ushered the children inside, she couldn't shake the feeling that Deputy Emmett Crowley represented more than just small-town suspicion. Something in his storm cloud eyes suggested he'd been burned by disappointment before. The schoolhouse door creaked as she pushed it open, and the children filed in with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. You could almost taste the anticipation in the air, thick as summer honey, sharp as desert wind. These weren't the polished children of Boston drawing rooms, with their pressed uniforms and practiced recitations. These were frontier children, sun-darkened and wind-roughened, carrying the weight of adult responsibilities on young shoulders. Miss Marsh called out a girl of perhaps 10, her auburn hair braided with prairie grass. Is it true you came all the way from Boston? It is, Miss Virginia Hope Paxton, ma'am. My daddy says Boston ladies are too delicate for frontier life. Luella set her satchel on the teacher's desk with deliberate care. What do you think, Miss Paxton? The girl studied her with startling intensity. I think anybody who'd come this far to teach us must be tougher than rawhide. A murmur of approval rippled through the room. Luella felt something loosen in her chest, the first breath of acceptance she'd tasted in months. Now then, she said, surveying her students. Before we begin our formal lessons, I'd like to know what you're truly curious about. Not what adults think you should learn, but what questions keep you awake at night. Silence stretched like a bowstring. Then Zebulon raised his hand, his jaw set with determination. Miss Marsh, why do folks always say we shouldn't reach too high? My pa says dreaming big just leads to falling hard. And what do you think, Mr. Rowe? I think maybe falling ain't the worst thing that can happen to a person. Maybe the worst thing is never trying to fly at all. The words hung in the air like a challenge to the universe itself. Luella felt her heart skip. This boy understood what she'd been trying to teach for years. Write that down, she said quietly. All of you, write down what Zebulon just said. As pencils scratched across slates, she moved between the desks, noting the careful way small hands formed letters, the fierce concentration on young faces. These children hungered for knowledge the way desert plants hungered for rain. Miss Marsh, a small voice piped up from the back. What if we can't spell all the words? Then we'll learn them together, Miss Dora Lenore Marsh. No relation, ma'am. Luella's breath caught. Another Marsh, here in this tiny frontier town. The coincidence felt like a message from the universe, or perhaps just the strange way fate wove its patterns across the vast tapestry of the West. Well then, Miss Marsh, she said with a smile, it seems we're destined to be allies. The morning passed in a blur of discovery. She found Agnes Perlina, barely 6, but already reading at a level that would shame Boston 5th graders. There was Orville, whose mathematical mind could calculate cattle inventory faster than most. Grown men. And quiet Hazel Irene, who spoke little but whose drawings captured the soul of prairie life with startling accuracy. Each child carried their own spark of brilliance, their own unique way of seeing the world. Back east, educators would have tried to mold them into identical shapes, pressing their wild frontier spirits into proper Boston forms. But here, in this sun-baked schoolhouse that smelled of sage and dreams, Luella saw something different. She saw possibility. When the lunch bell rang, a battered cowbell that Horace had mounted outside, the children scattered like tumbleweeds. In a windstorm, all except Zebulon, who lingered by her desk. Miss Marsh, he said quietly, what Deputy Crowley said about getting ideas above our station. He's not wrong about the disappointment part. Oh, my older brother had big dreams once. Wanted to be a doctor, study back east. But when push came to shove, Pa needed him on the ranch. Dreams don't pay for winter feed. Luella felt the familiar ache of recognition. How many bright minds, Had she watched dimmed by practical necessity? How many spirits had she seen broken on the altar of sensible choices? Zebulon, she said carefully, what if I told you that sometimes the biggest risk is not taking any risk at all? The boy's eyes sharpened. I'd say that sounds like something a person who's been disappointed might say. Smart boy. Too smart for his own good, as they'd said about her. Perhaps, she admitted. But I'd also say that some things are worth the risk of disappointment. And in the distance, a lone gunshot split the morning air. The gunshot's echo rolled across the prairie like thunder, and Luella felt her blood turn to ice water. Through the schoolhouse window, she could see dust rising from the main street, the kind of dust that meant horses moving fast, men moving faster. Everyone under your desks, she commanded, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her throat. Now, the children obeyed without question, their frontier-bred instincts sharper than any city child's. They'd heard gunshots before, knew the difference between celebration and trouble. This was trouble. Zebulon started to rise. Miss Marsh, maybe I should. You should stay exactly where you are, Mr. Rowe. She moved to the window, peering through the gap in the curtains. Your job is to protect the younger children. Main Street had erupted into chaos. Men poured from buildings like ants from a disturbed hill, some carrying rifles, others just their fists in fury. At the center of it all, she could see two figures locked in a struggle, one in a deputy's badge, the other in range clothes that had seen too many hard miles. Emmett Crowley. Her heart lurched, and she cursed herself for caring. She'd known the man all of 2 hours, and half of that had been spent bristling at his condescension. Yet something about seeing him in danger made her chest tight with worry. Miss Marsh. Virginia Hope's voice was small, frightened. Is someone hurt? I don't know, dear one. But we're going to stay right here until it's safe. Through the window, she watched Emmett wrestle a gun from his opponent's grip, his movements precise and deadly. The stranger was bigger, meaner looking, with the kind of face that suggested he'd never met a law he couldn't break. But Emmett moved like water, flowing around the man's clumsy swings, using his opponent's size against him. The fight ended with the stranger face down in the dirt, Emmett's knee in his back, and iron shackles clicking into place. Even from this distance, Luella could see the deputy's chest heaving, sweat darkening his shirt. Children, she said, not taking her eyes from the window, I want you to practice your letters. Write me a story about the bravest thing you've ever seen. As small hands reached for slates, she continued watching. Emmett hauled his prisoner to his feet, and she caught sight of the stranger's face, scarred, brutal, with eyes like chips of flint. He said something to Emmett that made the deputy's jaw tighten, his hand drop instinctively to his gun. Then those storm cloud eyes turned toward the schoolhouse, and Luella stepped back from the window, as if burned point 20 minutes later, as the children bent over their work. Boots sounded on the schoolhouse steps. Heavy, deliberate, the walk of a man who'd learned to announce his presence before entering a room full of potential targets. Miss Marsh. Emmett's voice carried through the door. It's Deputy Crowley. Mind if I come in? She smoothed her skirts, squared her shoulders. Of course, Deputy. He entered with his hat in his hands, and she noticed the way his gaze swept the room, checking corners, counting exits, cataloging potential threats. Old habits, she supposed. The kind a man learned when his life depended on staying alert. Children, she said, please continue your writing. Deputy Crowley has come to make sure we're safe. Emmett's eyes found hers across the room, and she saw something there she hadn't expected, gratitude. As if her simple acknowledgement of his purpose mattered more than it should. Everyone all right in here? He asked, his voice gentler than it had been that morning. We're fine, Zebulon answered, looking up from his slate. Miss Marsh made sure of it. Did she now? Emmett's gaze settled on her again, and she felt heat rise in her cheeks. That's what I like to hear. Deputy, she said carefully, the man you arrested, was he? Jake Morrison, wanted for cattle rustling in 3 counties. His jaw tightened. He won't be bothering anyone for a while. But something in his tone suggested there was more to the story. Luella filed that observation away, along with the way he'd looked at Morrison, not just with law enforcement authority, but with something personal. Something that tasted of old wounds and unfinished business. Miss Marsh, little Dora Lenore, spoke up. My story's about Deputy Crowley fighting the bad man. Is that all right? Emmett's face went carefully blank. Now, Miss Marsh, that's not really. It's perfectly fine. Dora, Luella interrupted. Bravery comes in many forms. But I don't know how to spell courageous, the girl continued. Couragous. Emmett said quietly. Courage, from the French word for heart. Luella stared at him. That wasn't the answer she'd expected from a man who'd warned her about giving children ideas above their station. There were depths to Deputy Emmett Crowley that his stern exterior didn't reveal. You speak French, Deputy? She asked. Some. Picked it up from a friend. The pause was telling. Long time ago. Will you stay for our afternoon lesson? The invitation slipped out before she could stop it. We're discussing the importance of different perspectives in understanding history. He shifted his weight, hat still in his hands. I don't want to intrude on your teaching, Miss Marsh. You wouldn't be intruding. In fact, you might offer valuable insights. What kind of insights? The kind that come from living history rather than just reading about it. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, or recognition. You really think these children need to hear about the less pleasant aspects of frontier life? I think they're already living those aspects, Deputy. The question is whether we help them understand what they're experiencing or leave them to figure it out alone. The room had gone quiet, 23 pairs of young eyes watching this verbal dance between their teacher and the town's lawman. Luella could feel the weight of their attention, the way they hung on every word like it might reveal some essential truth about the adult world they were desperate to understand. All right, Emmett said finally, but I reserve the right to leave if things get too philosophical. Fair enough. She turned to the children. Who can tell me what happened in town today? Virginia Hope raised her hand. There was a fight. Deputy Crowley arrested a bad man. And how do we know he was bad? Because he was fighting the deputy. Dora Lenore offered. Or, Zebulon said slowly, because he's wanted for cattle rustling in 3 counties. Emmett's eyebrows rose. Sharp ears, son. Sharp enough. Zebulon's gaze flicked between the deputy and his teacher. But I reckon there's more to it than that. Oh, Luella encouraged. Well, the way I see it, most folks don't just wake up one morning and decide to become outlaws. Something usually pushes them that direction. A muscle jumped in Emmett's jaw. And what do you think might push a man toward breaking the law, Mr. Rowe? Could be lots of things. Desperation. Anger. Maybe someone took something from him that he couldn't get back legal-like. The silence that followed was thick as molasses, heavy with unspoken truths and dangerous questions. The silence stretched like a taut wire, and Luella watched Emmett's face carefully. Something in Zebulon's innocent words had struck deep, hitting a nerve she hadn't known existed. The deputy's knuckles were white where they gripped his hat, and his storm cloud eyes had darkened to the color of an approaching tornado. Sometimes, Emmett said quietly, the law isn't enough. Sometimes a man has to choose between what's legal and what's right. And which did you choose today? Luella asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Today was easy. Morrison's wanted by federal marshals. But, he paused, seeming to weigh his words. Not every day is so clear-cut. Agnes Perlina raised her small hand. My pa says the law's different out here than back east. Says sometimes a man's got to be his own judge and jury. Your pa's not wrong, Emmett admitted. But that's a heavy burden to carry. Luella felt a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air seeping through the schoolhouse walls. There was something in Emmett's voice, a weariness that spoke of decisions made in darkness, of choices that left scars on a man's soul. Deputy, she said carefully, what happens when the law fails completely? Then good people suffer. His answer came too quickly, too sharp. And sometimes they die. The children sensed the shift in mood, the way the air had grown thick with adult pain. Virginia Hope chewed her pencil, while Zebulon watched Emmett with the intensity of a hawk spotting prey. Class dismissed, Luella announced, though it was still early. Remember to practice your letters tonight. As the children filed out, chattering in hushed tones, Emmett remained standing by the window. He'd replaced his hat, but hadn't moved toward the door, and Luella found herself studying his profile, the sharp line of his jaw, the way his shoulders carried tension like a yoke. You didn't have to send them away, he said without turning. They're frontier children. They've seen harder truths than most. Perhaps, but they're still children. And you think children should be protected from the realities of the world. She moved closer, drawn by something in his voice, not bitterness. Exactly, but a bone-deep exhaustion that spoke of too many battles fought alone. I think children should be prepared for the world, not broken by it. That's a fine line to walk, Miss Marsh. Most worthwhile things are. He turned then, and she was struck by how young he looked despite the weathered lines around his eyes. 25, maybe 26, but with the gravity of a man who'd lived twice that. Why did you really come here? He asked suddenly. To Willow Creek, I mean. What are you running from? The question hit her like a physical blow. What makes you think I'm running from anything? Boston ladies don't usually end up teaching school in Texas unless they've got compelling reasons to leave civilization behind. She lifted her chin, the gesture that had gotten her in trouble so many times before. Perhaps I came seeking something rather than fleeing it, such as purpose, a place where intelligence isn't considered a liability. And you think you'll find that here. I think I'll find whatever I'm brave enough to create. Something shifted in his expression, surprise, maybe, or recognition. You sound like someone who's been disappointed before. Don't we all? The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Outside, the afternoon sun painted the prairie in shades of gold and amber, and somewhere in the distance, a meadowlark sang its liquid song. But inside the schoolhouse, the air crackled with tension and possibility. Miss Marsh, Emmett said slowly, there's something you should know about Jake Morrison. Oh, he's not just wanted for cattle rustling. 3 months ago, he and his gang hit a stagecoach outside San Antonio, killed 2 passengers, including a young woman who was traveling to take up a teaching position. The blood drained from Luella's face. You think he came here because of me? I think Morrison goes where the money is. But teachers, they represent something he hates. Education, civilization, the kind of progress that makes his way of life impossible. Are you trying to frighten me, deputy? I'm trying to keep you alive. The stark honesty in his voice made her breath catch. Here was a man who'd seen enough death to know its weight, who carried the responsibility of protecting others like a stone in his chest. Why? She asked quietly. Why do you care what happens to one troublesome schoolmarm? He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, because the last teacher we had was a good man, Reverend Thomas. He lasted 6 months before the isolation and the difficulties drove him back to civilization. What kind of difficulties? The kind that come when you try to teach children to think for themselves in a place where thinking can get you killed. A chill ran down her spine. Are you saying someone threatened him? I'm saying that not everyone in Willow Creek believes in the value of education. Some folks think keeping children ignorant makes them easier to control. And you? What do you believe? I believe, he said carefully, that ignorance is the most dangerous thing in the world. It's what lets evil men convince good people to do terrible things. There it was again, that hint of personal pain, of battles fought and lost. Luella found herself stepping closer, drawn by an impulse she didn't fully understand. What happened to you, Emmett? The use of his first name surprised them both. What made you so certain that the world is a dangerous place? Miss Marsh, Luella, if we're going to work together to protect these children, we should at least use each other's names. Luella. Her name sounded different in his rough voice, softer somehow. Some stories are better left untold. Are they? Or are they the ones that need telling most? Before he could answer, the schoolhouse door burst open. Horace Delaney stood in the doorway, his face grave, his silver mustache trembling with barely contained rage. Emmett, he said, his voice tight with controlled fury. We've got a problem. Morrison's gang hit the Row place. They took August hostage. Luella's heart stopped. What about Zebulon? Boy's safe. He was in town when it happened. But they left a message. Horace's eyes found hers, and she saw something there that made her blood run cold. They want the schoolmarm. They'll trade August for her. The world tilted on its axis, and Luella realized that her past had finally caught up with her in the most terrible way possible. The words echoed in the sudden silence like gunshots. They want the schoolmarm. They'll trade August for her. Luella's knees nearly buckled, but she forced herself to remain standing. Through the window, she could see Zebulon in the distance, his young face twisted with anguish as neighbors tried to comfort him. A boy who'd spoken so eloquently about dreams and falling was now living his worst nightmare. No, Emmett's voice cut through the air like a blade. Absolutely not. It's not your choice to make, Luella said quietly, though her voice trembled. August Rowe is an innocent man. He has children who need him. And you think Morrison's just going to let you walk away after you hand yourself over? Emmett stepped between her and Horace, his body coiled with desperate energy. You think he'll honor some gentleman's agreement? I think a man's life is worth more than my comfort. Your comfort? Emmett's laugh was bitter as alkali water. Luella, he'll kill you. Maybe not right away, but eventually. Men like Morrison don't leave witnesses. Horace cleared his throat. There's more. Morrison's message said something about the Boston schoolmarm who thinks she's too clever. He knows about your past, Miss Marsh. Whatever happened back east, word's gotten around. The schoolhouse seemed to shrink around her. Back in Boston, she'd thought her troubles were confined to drawing rooms and faculty meetings. She'd never imagined that her reputation for dangerous ideas would follow her across 1,000 miles of prairie. What did you do? Emmett's voice was gentle now, but she could hear the steel beneath. What made you so dangerous that outlaws are tracking you? I taught children to question authority. The words came out smaller than she intended. In Boston, I encouraged students to think critically about their world, to challenge assumptions, to ask uncomfortable questions. That's all. That's everything. She moved to the window, watching Zebulon's shoulders shake with grief. One of my students, Timothy Whitmore, started asking questions about his father's factory, about why workers were getting sick, why safety conditions were so poor. His questions led to an investigation that cost his father significant money and influence. And they blamed you. They blamed me for filling his head with seditious ideas, for teaching him that intelligent people have a responsibility to speak truth to power. She turned back to face them. Apparently, that lesson followed me here. Emmett ran his hands through his hair, leaving it disheveled. This is about more than one teacher, then. Morrison's being paid to make an example of you. By whom? Could be anyone. Railroad barons who don't want educated workers asking for better conditions. Cattle kings who prefer their hands ignorant and compliant. Hell, it could be politicians who profit from keeping folks too stupid to vote against their own interests. The weight of it settled on her shoulders like a lead blanket. She'd thought she was fleeing personal persecution, but she'd stumbled into something much larger, a war between progress and the old ways, between enlightenment and willful ignorance. How long do we have? She asked. They want an answer by sundown, Horace said. That's 3 hours. Then we'd better get moving. Luella straightened her shoulders, the same gesture that had gotten her in trouble so many times before. But this time, it felt different. This time, it felt like armor. Luella, no. Emmett caught her arm as she moved toward the door. There has to be another way. What other way? Storm their camp? Risk August's life in a gunfight? Yes, if that's what it takes. The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Outside, the afternoon sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Beautiful and terrible, like everything else in this harsh land. There's something else, Horace said quietly. Morrison's not just asking for the schoolmarm. He wants her to come alone, unarmed, to the old Sinclair place. You know, the abandoned ranch about 5 miles north. Emmett cursed under his breath. That's perfect ambush country. Hills on 3 sides, only one way in or out. Which is exactly why he chose it, Luella said. He's not stupid. Neither are you, which is why you're not going. She turned to face him fully, and something in her expression made him step back. Deputy Crowley, I appreciate your concern, but I've been making my own choices for 24 years, and I don't intend to stop now. Even if those choices get you killed, even then. The silence stretched like a bowstring. Then Emmett did something that surprised them both. He laughed, a sound bitter and admiring at once. You really are too clever for your own good, aren't you? So I've been told. And stubborn as a mule. That too. And brave as a damn fool. I prefer determined. Determined to get yourself killed, maybe. Determined to save an innocent man's life. Emmett studied her for a long moment, and she could see the war playing out behind his storm cloud eyes. Finally, he sighed, a sound, like wind through prairie grass. All right, but if you're determined to throw your life away, you're not doing it alone. Emmett, no. His voice brooked no argument. If you're going to that ranch, I'm going with you. They said alone. They said unarmed. They didn't say anything about a deputy sheriff following at a distance. That's not what they meant, and you know it. I don't care what they meant. I care about what happens to you. The admission hung in the air between them, raw and honest. Luella felt her breath catch, her heart skip against her ribs. In his eyes, she saw something she'd never expected to find in this godforsaken patch of desert. A man who valued her mind, her courage, her stubborn determination to do what was right. Why? She whispered. Because, he said simply, this world needs more people who are too clever for their own good. And because I'll be damned if I let them silence you. But as the sun sank lower toward the horizon, painting the sky the color of blood and roses, neither of them could shake the feeling that some silences were deeper than death. The abandoned Sinclair ranch crouched against the twilight sky like a broken promise. Weathered boards sagged under the weight of neglect, and tumbleweeds gathered in the corners like forgotten dreams. Luella approached on foot, her heart hammering against her ribs, every sense alert to the danger lurking in the purple shadows. Behind her, somewhere in the mesquite and sage, Emmett followed at a distance. She couldn't see him, but she felt his presence like a warm hand on her shoulder. The knowledge that she wasn't truly alone gave her strength to keep walking toward what might be her death. That's far enough, schoolmarm. Jake Morrison emerged from the ranch house, dragging August Rowe behind him. The older man's face was bloodied, his hands bound, but his eyes blazed with unbroken spirit. Two other outlaws flanked Morrison, hard men with the kind of faces that belonged on wanted posters. Mr. Rowe, Luella called out, her voice steadier than she felt. Are you all right? Don't you worry about me, Miss Marsh, August replied, his voice hoarse but defiant. You just turn around and get yourself back to town. Morrison backhanded him across the mouth. Shut up, old man. The lady and I have business to discuss. Let him go, Luella said, stepping closer. I'm here as promised. Honor your word. Morrison's laugh was like gravel in a tin cup. My word. Lady, you really are too clever for your own good. Just not clever enough to know when you're walking into a trap. What do you mean? I mean there's more money in keeping you both. My employer's got special plans for the troublesome teacher and the rancher who's been asking too many questions about water rights. August's head snapped up. What are you talking about? Talking about the fact that your little investigation into who's been damming up the river is making certain important people nervous. Turns out you and the schoolmarm both got the same problem. You think too much. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't just about her past in Boston. August had been asking questions about water rights, probably trying to help his neighbors understand why their wells were going dry. Someone powerful wanted both the questioning rancher and the questioning teacher silenced permanently. Who's paying you? She demanded. Does it matter? Money's money, and there's enough of it to keep me comfortable for a long time. It matters to me. Morrison studied her with cold eyes. You really want to know? It's Cornelius Whitmore. Timothy's daddy. Seems the boy's been writing letters to his pa, telling him all about the wonderful new teacher in Texas who's got such interesting ideas about justice and progress. The world tilted beneath her feet. Timothy, sweet, bright Timothy who'd asked such dangerous questions, had inadvertently led his father straight to her. The boy's love for his teacher had become her death warrant. So you see, Morrison continued, this ain't just business anymore. It's personal. Whitmore wants you to understand that there's consequences for filling children's heads with seditious ideas. The only seditious idea I ever taught, Luella said quietly, was that every person has the right to think for themselves. And look, where it got you. A shot rang out across the prairie, and one of Morrison's men crumpled to the ground. Emmett emerged from behind the barn, his gun drawn, moving with the fluid grace of a predator. Let them go, Morrison, he called out. It's over. Is it? Morrison pressed his gun against August's temple. I've got 2 hostages and you've got 1 gun. Doesn't seem like very good odds to me. Maybe not. But I've got something you don't. What's that? Friends. The word had barely left his lips when gunfire erupted from 3 different directions. Horace Delaney appeared on the ridgeline to the east, rifle blazing. From the west came Virginia Hope's father, Tom Paxton, and from the south, a handful of other townsmen who decided they'd had enough of outside threats to their children's. Teacher Morrison's remaining man went down in the crossfire, but Morrison himself ducked behind August, using the rancher as a human shield. You think this changes anything? He snarled. I still got the old man, and I still got my orders. Your orders don't mean much if you're dead, Emmett replied, circling closer. Maybe not, but I can take them both with me. Time slowed to honey thickness. Luella could see the madness in Morrison's eyes, the desperate fury of a cornered animal. August's gaze met hers across the dusty yard, and she saw him mouth a single word: run. Instead, she did something that would have made her Boston critics proud. She thought her way out of the problem. Morrison, she called out, taking a step closer to the outlaw. Before you kill us, don't you want to know what Timothy Whitmore really wrote in those letters? What are you talking about? The letters to his father. The ones that brought you here. Do you know what they actually said? Morrison's grip on his gun loosened slightly. They said you were filling his head with dangerous ideas. No, Luella said, taking another step. They said I was the first teacher who ever made him proud to use his mind. They said I taught him. That intelligence was a gift, not a curse. They said he wanted to grow up to be the kind of man who protected people instead of exploiting them. So ask yourself, Morrison, when that boy grows up and learns that his father had his favorite teacher killed, what kind of man do you think he'll become? For just a moment, uncertainty flickered in Morrison's eyes. In that moment of hesitation, August threw himself sideways, breaking free of the outlaw's grip. Emmett's gun roared, and Morrison spun around, clutching his shoulder. Before the outlaw could recover, Luella was there, kicking his dropped weapon out of reach. Morrison collapsed to his knees, defeated and bleeding in the desert dust. It's over, Emmett said, reaching for her as his arms closed around her. Luella felt something she'd never experienced before, the absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. Not despite her intelligence, but because of it. Not in spite of her stubborn determination to do what was right, but because of it. Are you hurt? He whispered against her hair. No, she whispered back. I'm home. 6 months later, Luella stood in her schoolhouse garden, watching roses bloom in the desert soil. The same roses she'd planted the day after Morrison's trial, when Emmett had asked her to marry him, and she'd said yes, without a moment's hesitation. The children's laughter drifted through the open windows, and she could hear Zebulon's voice, raised in debate with Agnes Perlina about the proper pronunciation of a Latin phrase. Inside, her husband was guest lecturing about frontier law, answering their endless questions with the patience of a man who'd learned to value curiosity above conformity. If you ever find yourself too clever for your own good, remember Luella, Kate Marsh, who discovered that the right person will love you not despite your intelligence, but because of it. And if you enjoyed this tale of love blooming in the desert, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of hearts finding home on the frontier. Comment below and tell us where you're watching from today. We love hearing from folks all across this wide, wonderful world.